Good morning, everyone. Brian here with BMK Retro Gaming. Again, I've got some morning coffee here. One thing I may not have revealed is I've been doing a lot of these video recordings a little bit the night before to upload the next morning, but sometimes I just still go ahead with the early morning routine, so might or might not notice kind of whether I've got one of these may be a tip. Anyway, this morning I have for us the review of the Atari prototype game, Atari VCS 2600 prototype game, Xevious. Now, the arcade cabinet original, which it did have one, was developed in 1983 with Masan Budo or Basudo, I'm not sure how to pronounce that exactly, and Shigeki Toyama as the main developers, while music was done by Yuriko Kino and art by Hiroshi Ono. And it was published originally in Japan by Namco, and here in the North American market by Atari did the publishing and distribution for the arcade cabinet original. Then, well, in 1984, the prototype for the Atari VCS 2600 was being worked on. It was being developed by Todd Fry, who had also done the Pac-Man Atari VCS 2600 original library port, which is an okay Pac-Man game if you don't compare or contrast it to the arcade cabinet original, because it really wasn't even meant to totally stand up. But it's a decent Pac-Man game in its own right, where I'm concerned. Anyway, it was going to be published by Atari Corporation. And it's not quite a complete game, but nearly. In fact, about the only thing that Mr. Fry didn't get done was he didn't manage to get a couple minor glitches fixed, and he didn't quite get around to optimizing the game code, which is usually pretty much about the very last thing, along with a lot of times, sometimes sound effects, which go into most games. Anyway, it would have had a model number of CX-2695. And one thing that is interesting about it is Xevious, whether we're talking about the arcade cabinet original, this prototype, the Atari 7800 port, whatever, it was actually a bit of a new game genre when it first came out. Not drastically new, but you see, before we'd had only the basic fixed shooter, where you've got one screen that you're playing on, and the enemies materialize or they come onto screen at you. All versions of Xevious, including this one, scroll. In Xevious's cases, you could call it kind of a forward scroller, because the screen continually scrolls down to you as though you're moving forward and encountering more terrain and enemies. So that was it's something that we've seen since, that's been very, very common and is not unusual, but a scrolling shooter or a forward scrolling shooter, Xevious was pretty much technically the first one of the genre. So now, I must admit that when I did the little review of the Atari 7800 port of Xevious before, it was back when I wasn't quite as thorough and together with doing these reviews, so I didn't get as deep off into it as I could have. However, here with this one, those days, I've got to a point where I research more and write more down, take more notes, so I'm a bit more accurate here, and as such, I took down some information here for us. About, well, it being a prototype game like a lot, I couldn't find any really good instructions or anything for it, which happens with a lot of prototype games, but I was able to find some general information. Basically, the whole story is the Xevians were the original inhabitants of our planet, which we were originally the aliens. And they've returned to try and retake Earth for themselves. And, well, that also means getting rid of us. Fortunately, humanity has designed and has a ship called the Solvalou, I think it is, that's Solvalou, which has weapons capable of damaging and destroying the Xevious ships. And the Xevious ships basically consist of, there's a lot of them here. There's toroids, Torkin scouts, Jara spinners, mirrors, Zoshi death squads, which are also known as, sorry, reading the wrong thing. They're energy balls. There are Zakato energy launchers, which are also known as black balls. Don't know why I forgot to put an R in here. There we go, correcting my own little mistake. One of my stupid ticks. The Zakato energy launchers, which are known as black balls. Then there's the Andor Genesis, which is the mothership. And then there's the rovers, just a regular spear. Dorada defense stations, which are kind of a pyramid type enemy on the ground. And then the more standard square pyramids. And, well, with this one, with the difficulty switches do have a function. You see, if you put it into A mode, the screen will scroll forward slowly at a reasonable rate, so it's not too fast. Whereas if you put it in B, it's in the faster scrolling mode, which actually gets fast enough where it's pretty much not playable, so you're better leaving it in A. And it does have about, if I'm not mistaken, about 7 different game variations. I don't know what all the differences of them are. We're just going to play game 1. And it's pretty good. It has a couple minor glitches, such as that the enemies don't have much of a difference in their pattern. They come at you mostly the same. Let's see, and, well, there's a little bit of glitching in terms of, you know, the Andor Genesis mothership will, the image will kind of change, glitch in and out a little bit. Not a big deal. And then your ship, actually everything it's done, it presents all the enemies on the screen. It's pretty great, you know, as we'll see. But despite all this, Mr. Fry managed to get all this done without any real flicker except your ship. The Solvalou does flicker pretty frequently as you're playing, but it's about the only thing that really flickers too much. Other than that, there's the fact he didn't get around to optimizing the code before the project was canceled, so it's not 100% together, but still, it's pretty good for what we got. Anyway, the image that I used for it is, as far as I know, just a stock artwork image, which is what happens with a lot of these prototype games. I'm not well aware that there was ever a physical release, like through reproduction cartridge of this or anything like that for certain. However, there are ways you can get it. Let's see, there were a few different versions discovered of this, some a bit earlier, which of the game ROM, which have been released, including this one, which is the latest one from '84, which is the most complete. And the one which we're about to play, some here. And there are ways you can get it, which I'll go into a bit later. Anyway, don't want to waste too much time talking about it. I have the game ROM as a digital download on my Hyperkin 77 emulation hardware clone console, so I'm going to go ahead and get us set with that. Fire it up, and we're going to take a look into some gameplay. Okay, so here we go with gameplay for Xevious, Atari VCS 2600 prototype game. Get meant to get booted up and everything. Hopefully my controller won't want to be a pain in the neck today. Oh yeah, it does. One thing about this little thing is, sometimes it's just not 100% great about how it wants to do you on the level of, the controllers can just be somewhat finicky. Mine may be getting a bit old, maybe part of it. Anyway, here we go. We can see here it says it's a prototype 11884. It's the most the most advanced one. Says model type, says Todd Fry, Atari, and it's basically an F8, so it's an 8K cartridge, or would have been. We go here now. Let me make sure I've got it set up on A. Yep. We see there's different game variations here, though they do go through 8 right there. And now we're back to 1. They go through pretty fast. It's pretty fast here. Now, although it's traditionally more of a one-button game, let me get that volume down here a bit because it's kind of loud. You fire, you can have rapid fire by just holding down the button to fire, but by pressing fire once, instead, you also drop a bomb at the same time you're firing. That's kind of how he worked out solving the problem with it being more of a two-button game usually. Then you just use your joystick to control. You can see here the enemies are coming in, and they don't have much of a straight pattern to them or anything, but they do act in a certain manner, I guess you could say. You get a certain number of lives. I forget how many since I don't have instructions to tell me. I guess those little round things down there below my score tell me how many lives I have. And it's pretty easy with this one to rack up a high score since the enemies don't really vary their attacks much, if any at all. Oh. Like I said, you can see your ship is, it tends to flicker some, but otherwise it doesn't really, nothing else really does, so that's pretty good. I'm not going to try and identify all the enemy types, because that could be a pain in the neck, on one hand. Another thing that's interesting, kind of like the Atari 7800 port and, others is, if you lose at your last life and just press the fire button again rather than pressing restart, you'll get to continue back from a point not far from where you lost your last game, like so. Though you won't have your score anymore, but it still restarts you not far back from where you previously were. Which is kind of useful if you want to try to see and play through more of the game. Controls here are pretty smooth, I guess. It's got the music to it some and pretty good sound effects. I've seen some of my Atari 2600 Facebook group mention that they probably wouldn't find this to be interesting enough because it couldn't really replicate the arcade cabinet original in its gameplay that much. Well, hopefully some who might have thought that would be a bit surprised that this is actually rather good for a prototype. I can move forward, back to the center of the screen. I can maneuver pretty much how I want to, and again, instead of just having, say, 2 enemies on the screen at one time, you actually have a good selection of them at one time. Good, I got one of those at long last. Darn it. I've never been too good at playing any of the versions or ports of Xevious, and this prototype game, I'm not much better, but oh well. Yeah, it looks like it starts out with, 4 or 5 lives before you're totally gone, so. If I weren't talking and all, I've gotten a fair deal further on this one than not. I mean, I'm not great at any of the versions of Xevious, but if I weren't talking during the review video, it'd probably go a bit smoother, but oh well. should just hold down for rapid fire for now. Again, when you just do a single button press is when you also drop a bomb with it too. Right about where your little yellow targeting pipper there is. So in that respect, it's not really all that difficult to control in terms of, you know, you can get control over it and manage. Give another shot here real quick. Not too much of one because I don't want to drag this out too long. I've actually reached up to the mothership and/or Genesis stage before, at least the first time you encounter it, which should be coming up here in a bit, and that's what I'm trying to get to before we're done here. Missed. Again, like I said, it pretty much drops you back at a point about just a bit before where you last were, so... You'd think running into those guys might kill me, but the thing is, they're on the ground, I think it is, and I'm not, so... It is kind of a little bit trying to distinguish what's actually in the air and what's on the ground, but you can kind of tell. I mean, those guys move in a way that seems like they're moving with the ground terrain, so... Again, like I said, the enemies don't come in with really that much of any real pattern to them as much as they just come in. Makes it a bit easy with them in a way. As I've said before, it'd probably be a lot easier if I weren't talking while trying to do this little gameplay, but oh well. Ha! Not going to bother with you right now. Darn it, couldn't get it. Take those little guys because they'll fly straight into you and and so will those. Let's see, what kind of time do we have on this video so far? About 19 minutes. I think we can drag it out for just a little bit, see if I can get to that and/or Genesis. We're going to have to concentrate on that some here, though. And that's another thing actually I've been doing, is trying to focus some on maneuvering around. See that right there? That's another thing that we see in a lot of other versions of the game. A lot of this is starting to look a bit familiar, like what we would probably expect of well, to see from Xevious as a game. Oh, would you stop trying to just crash into me? That's so much of a ridiculously annoying tactic. Of course, partly my fault for keeping on trying to just hang back. Okay, one more time before I give this up. I mean, I should remember, son, that doing like I've been doing, just trying to hang back in one spot with Xevious doesn't work very well for you. I mean, this is still a prototype version of the game, but still, it's got a lot of the stuff that you'd expect from any of the others. Which, as far as I know, mostly the Atari 7800 port, but there are others, I think. I'd have to look. Forget if there was an Atari 8-bit release too or what. Trying to fight my way through here. That's one thing about any version of Xevious, though. There's enough enemies and stuff on screen that you have to keep track of that's a hazard to you that can be a bit tough to avoid every hazard. It's a very active, chaotic environment to fight your way through. It's not to say it can't be done or anything, just it's not easy. Okay, you gotta be kidding me with that. Come on. I must swear, if one of these little jerks goes ahead and tries to kill me that way one more time, it's going to be... I mean, seriously, that's getting way too annoying. Well, 6,000 points there. Let me see. One more shot. Getting towards the end of Genesis, I'm going to call this one a day. Okay, unfortunately it doesn't look like I'm going to get that far on this run. But I think you guys kind of get the idea of the gameplay already anyway, so... Okay, so that was Xevious, an Atari VCS 2600 prototype game from 1983. the most complete version. Again, my apologies I couldn't show us the Mothership and or Genesis, but it can be kind of tough at times. But you can see it's a pretty good game, very active, plenty of enemies, background music, it's not bad at all. Unfortunately, I've never been very good at any version of Xevious anyway, so I would love to show off that Mothership and or Genesis and see what's up with all that, but sometimes you can get there, sometimes you just can't. Anyway, again, I found this as, well, I'll go into that in a second. We'll go into here a minute, why wasn't it released? Well, it was, again, nearly complete. It needed to be optimized, needed a couple minor glitches fixed. But since it was it's a 1984 prototype, not 1983, I'm sorry, I looked at the wrong thing. Anyway, considering when it was being developed, 1984, was about the same time that Warner Communications sold Atari to Mr. Jack Tramiel, and it went from being Atari Corporation to Atari Inc., I believe it was, yes. And you see, well, although there may have been some speculation back then, that Mr. Tramiel was more, having come from Commodore, wanted to do more home computers, and that was his whole thing. Well, some people have corrected me that there's been plenty, like in my Atari 7800 Pro System Facebook group have corrected me before that that's more or less been debunked over time. You see, how it basically went down was this, at the time, as we know, the 1983 industry and market crash had happened, and although some of us gamers may or may not have had much awareness of it and all, people inside the industry and market, probably some of our parents, and the news media, it was kind of known that it was going on. And so a lot of people, including Mr. Tramiel and his people coming in to change with the company, probably would have also been under the impression that the North American market for video games was pretty much so it would have made sense to go ahead and focus more on the home computers, which were hot for a couple of years, and which they did focus on more. So the man isn't alive for us to ask his reasons about why he did everything, but it kind of made business sense back then. Not to mention they were making a lot of cuts to things, projects which had already, kind of fluffed out, like the Atari 5200 and its related projects. Well, there's an argument that could be made you could have gone ahead and released the controller redesign that had been created under the previous Atari Corporation and give it a shot, but then again, there was also the North American market for video games seemed to be just going kaput, so it wouldn't have been a very business sense idea. That combined with that the Atari 5200 was already considered largely not very successful, understandable on that one. Then with the VCS 2600 projects, mostly prototypes and stuff, things which were in development, more of them than not were actually canceled. Now some were actually handed over to General Computer Corporation, GCC, which at the time was both a software and hardware developer who actually developed and, the Atari 7800. They've done a lot of the arcade games like the update ports to Pac-Man and stuff like Crazy Auto, which would eventually become Miss Pac-Man and all. And although they didn't work directly for Atari or anything like that, they did a lot of work for them under contract, and so it would have had what we would call a second-party relationship. That's where they're not working totally independent of Atari as the console company, like a third-party developer programmer of games or hardware would. But where, they're working under contract for Atari, though they're not technically part of the company itself. Anyway, a lot of the projects were handed over that were incomplete from the Atari VCS 2600. Prototypes and stuff that were going forward were handed over to them to deal with. And, of course, as we know down the line, other proof... basically, Atari had been, as a company before the sale by Warner to Tramiel, had been bleeding money badly. And he and his team were trying to take cost-saving measures to bring the company back to viability, which they ultimately did. And it's kind of sad that things like, including Xevious, the prototype, were canceled in that, but just happened. Of course, some of the things that proved to us that Mr. Tramiel was not just trying to turn Atari into a home computer company are like, when the third generation Nintendo NES was released and basically started to revive the North American home video game console market for home video game consoles and games. Well, the Atari 7800, which had been only released to test markets in '84, was re-released in a full release. Then we got the Atari XE game systems, or ZEGs, not long after. ZEGs as it's sometimes known. Then the Atari's handheld, the Atari Lynx, somewhere down the line, and in between that we got the Atari 2600 Junior, and finally Atari's entry, which kind of was an early jumpstart to the fifth generation of consoles and games, the Jaguar, which was not terribly successful and was pretty much the final nail in the coffin for Atari Corporation after it I wouldn't say it failed spectacularly, but it certainly didn't perform nearly as well as it could have. It kind of did somewhat similar to the original Magnavox Odyssey, the very first home video game console, at somewhere between about 250,000 and 500,000 units sold. So that all kind of proves, yes, the man was interested in making money off of Atari's business with home video game consoles and games, and not just turning it into a home computer company. He was just doing what was prudent at the time, business-wise. But then again, on my part or anyone else's, that's all pretty much speculation. We can't say for sure since he's not here to ask. But it would make kind of sense looking at it that way. Anyway, I have one recommendation and link for you guys, which is High Retro Game Lord, my preferred YouTuber. He plays a slightly earlier prototype version of the game, but it's still pretty good, especially if you're interested in seeing kind of how this all developed and everything. Now, where could you find and play some of this? Well, I'm not sure if it's this more complete version or not, but at least the game ROM as a digital download, I'm pretty sure for free, appears to be available through AtariMania.com. So I'll leave a link to that, as well as a link to High Retro Game Lord's video, and a link to the Wikipedia article, which does discuss this, along with the rest about Xevious, and one that for the AtariProtos.com, which goes into Xevious. Their article goes into it a bit better. Anyway, keep your eyes peeled and on my feeds here on YouTube, as well as on Facebook and on Twitter for what Wednesday's upcoming Atari VCS 2600 original library review will be, as I will have that up later on today. I already pretty much have it picked out, just have to get ready to do it. And in the meantime, big shout out to my Atari 2600 Facebook group. Love you guys over there. And hopefully y'all will get this before too long, as well as that announcement post for that upcoming Atari VCS 2600 original library review later this coming Wednesday. In the meantime, if you enjoy this channel's content, please feel free to like, share, and subscribe. And please don't hesitate to leave any questions, comments, or suggestions down in the comment section below. You guys take care. Have a wonderful Sunday. And hopefully I will see everyone back here again this coming Wednesday.